Hello, everyone. The title of tonight's episode is Behavioral Revolutions and Shifting Languages. And, and I would like to speak about collective languages. Collective thinking. Just a second, guys. I'm trying to find the song. All right, there we go. The study of languages is very crucial. I find that there is nothing more important for the human being to do than to see what is going on. And when we look at what life is, it is a series of particles moving in space, which they appear to each other in various subjective realms. You can say the atom is not alone. It brings with itself a world to be in. When you look at history, you simply see that it was nature was the governing power. Before we were conscious of our individuality, nature was administrating everything. Now, as human development occurs, it's like power structures come into place. That means the human being is defining itself in accordance to its experiences and finds itself to have more of a subjective awareness of the environment. So at first it was just objective resources we were trying to grab, and now it has become more of subjective resources, which is an addition of an awareness to the environment. That means we were just hungry for food. Now we're hungry for data. We are hungry for an awareness to what else is there. Now, the power structure, when you kind of look at the evolution of languages, you see that I remember hearing Noam Chomsky in this interview on the concept of language. He was simply suggesting to the interviewer that it has to do with cultural and social influences as well, how languages come into place. And Noam Chomsky gave this example that, for example, uh, Chomsky said Black English. What he meant, the kind of English dialect that Black people speak in America. He said it's different. It's considered differently than, for example, the speech of the governing power. And what that means is Chomsky was saying that if for example, there was a switch in the power structure rather than this kind of white definer. I don't know how to say it. Pretty much Chomsky, nowadays it's sensitive to talk about these things, but Chomsky was simply suggesting that those in power dictate, suggest the language that is necessary for the survival of the person. So, in this concept of behavioral revolutions and shifting languages, I want to bring the attention of the audience to a sense that the language shifts in accordance to the behavior that is welcomed or has a sort of survival value. Language is being treated by the human being not as a tangible phenomenon. It is being treated as something that adjusts to the experience. Just a second, guys. I'm looking for something. There we go. I find that after the human being is content with a maintenance of the material reality, what appears to us as objective in the moment, once we are comfortable acknowledging it, the mind will move on. There have been times I have felt that the only way to survive is to declare war. There have been times that I felt that even if one declared war, it's as if the war is lost. I felt the macrocosm doesn't care for the human being. If the macrocosm doesn't care, why should the microcosm? I had that sort of thinking. I have pointed my finger at the sky many times. Sometimes in rage, sometimes in joy, sometimes in awe, and sometimes because there was nowhere else left to point to. The unknown has visited me since my childhood, and I feel the unknown visits everyone. It's a moment of their life where they find the kind of simple humility where they're like, okay, I don't know. And there's this simple click that happens there. The person has allowed themselves to see beyond what they want. I find language is the key. It's like I've been intuitively kind of steered towards it. I often ask myself, why? Why do I care so much about uh, temporary symbols? And I realize it's because these temporary symbols is what the species has in this moment. I felt there had to be a purpose to the tool. That means no tool comes into design without a purpose. But then I saw that sometimes there is no specific consequence to things. It's like pouring a cup of water in a river. It's like regardless of that action, the implication of meaning of it will never be understood to some degree. I remember in this short story I wrote that it was like kind of like this version of human civilization where in ancient times this kind of enlightened advanced being had come down to earth, and it had told it had saved, like it had really made earth into a great place, but it told it that this boulder must, like this giant boulder, which it must be carried by every human being. And so it was this situation that human beings were all taking turns from the moment they were born in helping carry this giant boulder. And after the alien left, in many years, hundreds of thousands, not like, hundreds of years after this extraterrestrial had kind of left, and these humans are using all the advanced technology the extraterrestrial gave them, and still they're carrying this boulder. Eventually one kid enters that society who decides not to carry this giant boulder. And so it's this kind of realization that the reason the extraterrestrial in that short story told human beings, to all of them, to help carry this giant boulder was to realize that the value of the temporary existence is collective access. It was a way of keeping the collectivity alive in the storms that are to come, the collective vision. Believe it or not, it's like The urge to be part of a greater story as a linguistic creature. Human beings are not just dealing with language, they're also dealing with image. Image, which comes to us through visual senses, appears to be the most real thing here. That means I'm knocking on my laptop right now. It's real, it's here, you know. We don't need formulas, theories for it. That was the kind of notion of true, of reality, that which is the instant access to the real. Do you know? Now, the thing about the human being is that I find the situation has become more complex with the addition of a subjective realm. That means it's no longer just important what kind of food the person eats, but also the language that flows through their mind. There is a war of language going on, and what that means is the authentic nature of human beings is in combat with stories of the environment. That means imagine your conditioning is a lullaby. The environment, the ecosystem has been singing in your ears since your childhood in all the ways, all the places you have lived. At some point in the language, there must be solid definition. Language is a kind of the subjective realm is made of, I can say it playfully, there's three states at least man can access it. And think of it as if kind of water being able to be in solid, in the substance, being able to be solid, being liquid, fluid, and then being in some sense in a gas state. So, what does that mean? That means the subjective realm, which paints itself upon the objective realm, can be solid. What that means is I can totally see myself separate from all these objects in the room, you know? So that's kind of like a more where the subjective realm is still too close to the objective realm. Then there is the flow states of man, and anytime you see like a rock star on a concert a stage in that zone, or an athlete in the zone, or a kind of that UN speaker in the zone, like that moment when the person gets in the zone, that's when I say the subjective realm and the objective realm has for the first time come down to its like here, check it out. That solid state is 50% known, 50% unknown. The liquid state is more like 70% unknown, 30% known. The gas state is where it becomes close to 99% unknown and 1% known. Okay, and when man goes closer to the unknown, subjective reality evaporates, that's a bit chaotic. Not a lot of people are acquainted to able to confront that sort of silence. I find it's a chaotic silence. It's literally the silence of non-conception. So it's not like not too many beings can enter that room. I find, you know, because it's not even necessary. You know, you got to think about it this way: that everything you have done has given some sort of subjective momentum to your life. And does it serve to see further ahead? Another way of saying it is that right now we're just objective creatures that have just noticed they're subjective. It's so like even though language has developed for many years, what I'm saying it's if we have it like in 2019, it's as if we're suddenly returning to okay, 50% known, 50% unknown. And the whole issue is language has been trying to replace the unknown and it cannot. That means you can bow to any idea. Did you know? You can make any idea. You can worship any idea. Just like people worship Thor, you know, you can worship time. You can worship anything that your attention stands on. Because the whole act of worshiping was the conducting of the attention. Like what was more fascinating about the Noah's Ark story is how did all the animals enter the boat? Do you know it was as if they weren't normal animals? The normal animal instinct is not conscious of the environment. Do you see? So sometimes People are alive because the planet needs a certain memory, you know? Only history knows who the heroes are, and the heroes tend to never be able to know. Now, check this out. If you in the moment feel you 100% know everything, guess what? Life is going to become like a painting, it's going to become lifeless. So that's the importance of the subjective um, hands upon the neck of the objective. They can suffocate it into lifelessness. And that may be an extreme metaphor, but what I'm trying to simply suggest is that it's the nature of the impact which suggests the intensity. So I'll be honest, if there weren't certain intense things that happened to me in my life, I wouldn't be able to say certain things with certain intensities. The human being is such a multidimensional phenomena that it's like you're not just given the empty paper and the pen in your hand. You're also given the moment to read what you have written. You see, when you read, you assume the world is there. When you write, you create the world. You put the world there. There's a total difference. One is a reception mentality. You are receiving phenomena. The behavior is based on being the effect of something else. You know? A lot of languages arise from mythologies. The mythology is significant because it shared personalities. That means, to be honest, language was not just created to document what happened outside. Like, it's not the purpose of language is not just historical documentation. It is also to see how they saw. One thing is certain: the environment becomes a part of you. I consider that, believe it or not, this waking state of my life is 1/3 of my life. The whole waking state, all the years that I will live, or whenever the last breath will arise. The yogis had a very beautiful saying. It was something like, it's as if they leave the body, they exit the body with their breath. That means it's like the breath is, they kind of had a different approach to the breath. It wasn't just a lifeless elemental thing, it was life force. And so the breath was the force that, in some sense, evoked the life. You know, to be honest, a lot of traditions, you go look at the word soul, and it comes from breath. That means it's like people looked at a person, and when the person died, the breath left the body. And in that moment, it was just as if something had left the body, as if something that was there, that was aware of life, is no longer there. And it's left behind in the memories. If we are a creature of mind, The collective behavior means it's integrative. That means people should not freak out. Eventually, uh, you can't have 8 billion people on a rock and not have them not influence one another. Eventually, it will happen. But to what degree it will happen is a suggestion where, of course, it's kind of like playful at this point. I'm entertaining the notion that the behavioral revolution is out of the position or the main story consciousness is telling itself. That means language will change in a way where man will see his world was never what he thought it was. And then collective thinking, I think, develops from an unknown field. What that means is either man moves the world or the world moves man. And when man cannot move the world any further, the world moves man. So trust me, the beginning, your free will is like a Sadi kind of suggested it. He said life is like a yarn, a ball of wool. It has no beginning or end because the more you go towards the beginning, the more you get closer to non conception. And the more you go closer towards the end, you get closer to non conception. And because the person is a creature of thought during its life while it's alive, of course, any projection of what was before and after could be animated endlessly. I could feel like I had a past life ad infinitum or future life ad infinitum. But why is it necessary? Why is it necessary to have language define me when I am the one giving value to language? So, this language in its subtler form is the ideas and stories that keep you alive. Now, where does this go in regards to the awareness to the subjective realm? At most, you find the freedom. It's not like you can control thoughts. I mean, a person like right now, you can say, okay, I'm certain rhythm of imagery is going on behind my eyes, and I'm just vocalizing it to some degree, you know? I feel that's what's happening behind our eyes. Rivers of various factors of what we have been exposed to are just it's like a whirlpool of attention into the present moment. That means we spiral into our memories. Did you know? I remember asking a friend, and we were a deep conversation had started, and I asked her, what is your kind of conclusion on consciousness in regards to, do you feel it's about living for others or yourself? And her answer was hilarious. It was instant. It was as if she didn't have to think about it. She's like, live for yourself, live for yourself. And when I kind of noticed what she had understood is that it's like, check this out. The more the child gets betrayed by the civilization it expects, it harbors its own emotions, but eventually realizes, because the world doesn't see its eyes and it's the only one that it sees its eyes, of course, you have no choice but to live for the self that you see. You have to kind of drive your eyes on this planet, but I also noticed that it's like, this is the challenge. This is the cultural, social challenge, that the human being is a sort of a battery of energy, and and this battery is not being used for anything. It's like our days, every day that I am in some sense, I don't feel like I did something towards humanity's kind of vision. It feels like, like the candle was on but there was nobody in the room. It feels, I feel we are burning for the proper acknowledgement of our true natures. It's like the challenge is not just the person from the mystical angle knowing who they are as a being, reacquainting with their whole moment of existence and experience, kind of seeing it in the light that's in their eyes, not in the light that's in the eyes of others. Once you understand the self-reflective nature of phenomena and how kind of language is a response to it, language is definitely Rene Descartes' mind-body dualism was on point. That means we have to observe the body, and then we have to have observed the symbol for the language. Then when we look at the object, we're like, all right, that object is suddenly my glasses, you know? I'm literally looking at my glasses right. Excuse me. So that's the thing. This relationship of thought and matter is something that needs to be paid attention to rather than people just choosing one side, you know? It's kind of like this whole atheist theist kind of debate thing that you see there's a lot of debates on it on YouTube. You see that it's kind of, what is it? One group is saying we know, and that other group is saying you don't know. That's the whole war, guys. It's about which language is going to rule them all, you know? And trust me, language is as afraid as man. You know, sometimes I have looked at certain designs on this planet, certain ideas, and I just felt like the poor idea has so much potential, but it can't do anything. So what I mean by that is that the world is about, and not, we're transferring objects right now. Okay, it's like, think of it this way. Um, when you look at at least the evolution of the economical system, it was first bartering. People were trading stuff. Some person had a stick, the other person had a stone, and they're like, "Yo, let's trade." You know, it was that kind of system. But as it got more complex, and eventually, a sort of there was the birth of the monetary system. That changed our whole psychology. You know, it's kind of like the environment is thinking, and you as the living being are responsible to observe how the environment is thinking, and if you see further, share. If not, just carry on. You see, it's about not just having an external discipline. You know, it's the two sides of the brain that must be watered. There is one side where you should have moments in this life, I find, as a human being, where you wonder about freedom. Just wonder what it means to you as a being. And then there will be moments where you must wonder about discipline. So it's kind of like two sides of the coin of service and joy. It's like when you serve properly, the joy is in the acknowledgement of it. But the system, it's as if, first of all, the system is so big that it's not a one man job. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the behavioral revolution will always come at a cost. Anything, any way the person behaves, you can just see how it's an opportunity cost of its opposite. There are people known praying their whole lives only to see that their outcome is not where their prayers were. You know, I have had various moments. I remember when I was younger, I was kind of engulfed in a sort of prayer mindset, you know? And the prayer mindset for me, I'm kind of happy I was a bit of a lazy student in my youth. But it was a sort of personal dialogue with whatever the moment was. And so the thing was, believe it or not, it's kind of profound. This is something that at least you find in a theocracy, is that depression is religiously handled. You know. You know, sometimes trying to solve a puzzle, um, you get taunted by your own ability. Honestly, for me, I'm starting to notice that really language is waiting for something else. It's like certain clues that I've kind of uncovered during these talks was that one, there will come a technology that is the child of light and sound, you know? And there, I had this kind of idea that this technology that comes from light and sound is the only thing. It's like there's something there that will make technology conscious. To be honest, the nullification of value. It's like, imagine like there's zero. Imagine we make the number system. You know, let's start from a set of whole numbers. Let's say we start from zero. There's a dimension of space. Then we have the number one. We have the arrival of the first actual dimension. And then we have, let's say, the dimension of two coming, where it's the singular at least copied itself. It didn't do something special. It just made it made one into two. Now, the moment two came, the second dimension was born from the first. The second dimension understood its reliance on the first and the space. So, language is what I call a dualistic technology. You literally need more than one reference point to speak. Do you know, you have to be able to compare one thing to another. And if you really look at what knowledge is or what teachers are teaching everywhere, they're just referring, comparing things to things. And when you realize the purpose of language was to transport image or attention to image, then you realize knowledge and speech and language is not just for storage. You're not storing language for the winter. You know, language is, oh, you pick up what is necessary. The lion, strangely, you look at the lion doesn't eat what it doesn't kill. That means what it doesn't do itself, it doesn't trust. You see? And so the mind is strangely similar. If the person doesn't experience something themselves, they won't trust it, right? And this is why Western societies have been pulled. It's strange. It was like sometimes I think countries have karmas too, you know? And so Western civilization, especially with, I remember it kind of shocked me. I realized in certain universities in America, this kind of strange movement had occurred. It's like you cannot hide people from their own truth for too long, you know? And so what had happened is like this group of Stanford students had somehow, I don't know if they stole it or whatever, but it was like the idea was that they got access to this LSD, pure LSD, like it was meant to be some military thing. Then I don't know. Terrence McKenna was explaining it, you know. And so pretty much, so what happens is these Stanford kids found a way to alter consciousness. Now the thing is, our civilization, since ancient times, barbarians and the winners would celebrate, you know, with drinks in their hand, you know. Even the concept of, you know, shamanic practices, it's like human beings, as they had savage lives, they had savage minds, and the savagery of their mind was more content with the world than our civilized mind with the savageness of the world. Do you see? Man has been pushed out of his element into his own artificial creation, and that was necessary. So the story is these Stanford students eventually set up some party and they give, for example, this psychedelic kind of, they put LSD in the drink or something, and then it starts like the whole hippie movement, or like there's various factors to it, but it's just about man having questions about the world he is in and finding attempts at trying to see, try to uncover it. So think of life changing from being like one story to being a process of going through and traveling through various stories. So it's like it's not just people that tell stories in the moment. Your sensory reception is literally how manifestation is being a story in your eyes. How do we get 8 billion people to wonder about what is behind their eyes, to be able to reconfigure experientially and directly what is happening in front of them? Honestly, I'm like, in some manner, I've had moments where I can say I wasn't a theological or kind of theosophical perception. It was mainly me trying to calculate the scale of the implication of certain thoughts in my experience. And so it was one of those things where I thought about the unfathomable kind of stretch and extension. Like, let me tell you something kind of, this is kind of interesting, maybe I share. I thought about God being the unknown. And then, because it was the unknown, any unknown definition of a concept seemed to have access to it. That means I suddenly saw space as God. I've had moments where it's kind of like if God is this riddle, that it's something that, in some sense, is everywhere and within everything, and is even watching everything, and is inconceivable by the mind. So it's like that's the riddle religion is giving. Okay, and so I went in my young mind. I was kind of wondering what could this be, and I noticed, all right, it could be like space, holding everything, being aware of everything. So for a long time, I felt God was space, was not space, but like you know what I mean. It was like space. I felt I didn't even have the concept of a field in my mind yet at that point. It was just it appeared to me as space. And then I thought about at some point it was time. God is time. The time is the only thing that is moving everything and changing everything and being aware of it. Time gets the last glance. And so I had various attempts, various ways, and various other views. Sometimes I thought it was a wave. I thought God was like literally like there is this cosmic kind of speaker that's just giving off waves of manifestation. Like I've thought about it in various ways. But the thing is that in all those attempts, I could not value the unknown. I couldn't give a value to the unknown. So I reached a point where I thought of the kind of Abrahamic God, a God that is everything. And to be everything, because there is also nothing, means to also be nothing. So I kind of noticed that what appears to man as the spiritual realm is actually the inconceivable realm. And when I say it's inconceivable, it's like literally when you're on this side of the portal, of course you can't conceive the other side. When you go through the portal, you see the other side. If you stand in the middle awkwardly as if your shoulders went in and like kind of one eye is on one side of the portal and your other eye is on the other side of the portal, then, your left brain hemisphere would be moving in a different world than your right brain hemisphere. What can realistically happen? What can realistically happen? What can happen to these 8 billion beings? You say it's kind of like, isn't it hilarious? We think of extinction, but every person dies, and extinction is every person dying in one moment. And I find it's like one of those situations where we are living in our dreams more than in our reality. And it's because we have given up on nature. We felt it was too behind, not realizing a fish out of water is not a fish. A human being in a virtual technological kind of virtual reality simulation is not a human being. And similarly, you can say subjectivity is a subtler kind of virtual reality. It's literally the extension of attention. Because right now, I'm kind of like being present, sitting still and silent, and I'm like, what is this attention? And it's just being there. Do you see? It's a moment that is being. So whatever you do, that this quality of how the moment is still being is changeless. So it's as if it's like a question saying the man who has seen eternity, can he be temporary? The cool thing is regardless of the conception we have, nature will continue. What is more divine than continuity for a temporary being? I feel civilization should be built like a vehicle that can be tested. And the one common language human beings speak is the language of biological human design. So, if we had a way to relate all knowledge to biological human design, that means by the person realizing, like, we made medical studies more important than mathematics. What I mean by sorry, not mathematics. What am I saying? More important than literature to some degree. I don't know how to tell you. It's like, imagine a child being born, and by just learning everything that is happening in the human body, from that, it also, I don't know how to say it. It's imagine for the history, by looking at your hand, you could also see history. And oh man, this is too complex to explain. The language in people's minds can lead to war and peace. And what's underneath that language is a presence of attention that I personally find it's attributeless. It's like glass. And this is so true. It's like the glass goes on whatever surface, it takes a personality in accordance to it. So what does that mean is that you are, when you are purely alone, the reflection, literally how your eyes are being the moment, is are different than with the presence of other minds or other things in your environment. One question comes, can the person truly be alone in a world so integrated and connected? The second question comes, if the person gets an experience of a sort of solitude, what is the value? Some experiences the person may be having, and literally civilization doesn't have the words for to acknowledge. Action is also a huge part of this. A person can't linger in too much thought. Life will become hollow that way too. It's more about, kind of, life is like you're on a surfboard. It's not about rational method, irrational method. It's just about kind of seeing where your feet's at, you know. And when you really come into the presence of the moment, believe it or not, it will be like meeting an alien. What that means is that there would be something so new about that state of mind that you'll notice that it's not based on a past archetype, it's new archetypes are developing. There are archetypes in the subconscious of the person. For example, the archetype of a savior. Do you know how many people are waiting to be saved? It's ridiculous. They're waiting to be saved without realizing life is, again, a temporary stage, you know. The relationship of the species with the language that is directing its mind and its relationship with its unconscious. And that's pretty much what I'm saying we need to pay attention to as a species. So anyways, guys, that's for the talk section. I'm going to pay attention to the chat. Hold on. Okay. Oh, hey, Idris, welcome. You know, the issue is that Idris, I got to tell you the story like as a response to your comments. There's this story I heard when I was very young, and I think my grandmother told it to me. One version of the story my grandmother told me. But the story is, there's this lady that is waiting in. Is it the lady? There's this lady who is waiting to meet God. Okay, God comes to her in a dream, and she's been, like, you know, this is an ancient story, like old story. This lady's been cleaning her house every day, and she's constantly been praying, God, come and visit me, something like that. In one of her dreams, she suddenly gets a vision where a voice comes and says, yeah, I'll visit you. I'm going to be there tomorrow. You know, like some voice like that. Now, what happens is the lady cleans the house and makes it perfect and everything, you know? And she's like, oh my God, God is visiting me today, you know, being a guest of my home, this beautiful home I've made. And so what happens is suddenly somebody knocks, and it's like the mailman, you know? You know? And the mailman's like, ma'am, I'm thirsty. I need a glass of water. Can you help me out? And here's your mail, something like that. And the lady's like, get out of here, man. You know? She's like, leave. You know, I don't have time for this. You know, God is visiting my home. You know, God is about to visit me. And the guy's like, God's about to visit you. I just want a glass of water, lady, you know? And the lady says no. And the guy, this thirsty man, mailman, continues his road. Now she's waiting at home. She's like, God's about to visit. Oh my God, this is crazy, you know? And she's thinking constantly. And suddenly the door knocks, and it's like the neighbor, and the neighbor needs something, you know? You know, it's the neighbor's son, you know? And the lady sends the neighbor's kid away. Then it's like some beggar that comes, and she sends him away. And she's waiting for God, for this God to visit her home. Eventually, nobody arrives. And in her dream, she suddenly finds herself with a dialogue with that voice, and she says, "Why didn't you come? You said you would come." And the voice says, "I came there so many times. I came there 3 times. You didn't realize it." And it's this notion of a relationship with an unknown field of intelligence rather than giving it an ideological divine agency kind of costume. That's the thing. It's the presence of the world that is moving how personalities are even adopted from the environment. I feel that the human being will not feel part of something until it does something there. And so human beings are born told that they're part of a civilization, a part of their species, but at the same time, there's this incredible sort of every person in their own room dynamic going on. We're like 8 billion people in the same world, but we don't see the same world. You see? And that's the challenge. That's where the problem is at, you know? I think it comes down to this basic evolutionary impulse that when the person is conscious, there must be effort exerted. Now, this effort has found a way to be move internally and externally. That means a person can sit down, close their eyes, and still their effort can lead to certain a sort of conceptual scene. At the same time, the person can move and go do many things, and of course, the attention becomes externalized. As languages shift, there will be new waves of behavior, new revolutions in how people are aware of the moment. It's like subjective, abstract sensitivity is moving more to existential and experiential sensitivity. It's like in an earthquake, nobody has time to pray, they're running, you know? The objective realm has its own it's its own room, so you got to acknowledge it that way. And the subjective realm is it's much more malleable. In my subtler planes of imagination, like right now, if I was to visualize, for example, this cup in front of me hovering in the air, and in the cup it's hovering in the air, so gravity is not acting upon it, as if in my imagination the laws of objective reality are not that fixed, as if it's its own private room. That private room makes me wonder of the nature of the whole thing, which eventually led to kind of my conclusion. I think Carl Jung got to the same point by just creating just saying these two phrases of the collective unconscious. That means the collective unconscious is where it's the edge of the individual sight. But beyond the collective unconscious, it's the collective conscious. The collective conscious is not one personality. So think of right now, you're a mind that only has your memories in this life. Let's say, imagine your childhood or whatever, or whoever you think you are. This is the content of your mind. But now imagine being a field that is like 8 billion minds at once, right? So that field is literally, even if you start from an individual search, it will have a collective consequence. Because here's the thing: either consciousness closes its eyes, or it opens them in a new way. What other game is there? You see, it was the story of King Arthur. It's as if the right hands must find the right sword, the right tools must find the right moment. And I think this is the thing, that we are not at a point where we have to just create tools for the future generations to not forget their nature. Language is an inner contribution, but there has to be external changes. What does that mean? That means we're not just thoughts, we're also bodies. The body requires movement, and the mind requires certain movements as well. Now, how do we administer this? How does the creature? Well, we look at kind of like there was this very profound philosophical argument, and some people were like, whoa, 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 whoa. You look at a baby deer being born, right? When it's born, it suddenly knows how to walk. It has access to its genetical memory. But when we look at the human being has to be trained. The child has to be taught how to walk, how to speak. Do you see? So what that means is what the child knows by nature, it knows, right? It's kind of, again, okay, let me first set the problem. The idea was that natural beings naturally know. The human being is a natural being which strangely doesn't know nature. There's a sort of amnesia as the individual consciousness is developed from the whole thing. I feel a new story will come, a greater story. This greater story will bring forth new archetypes, therefore a new sense of responsibilities for the Homo sapien. It's no longer just survival of, even if we just saw it as survival of the fittest, it's no longer a singular survival, it's a multidimensional survival. It's as if what is behind the eyes of our fellow human species is what is behind our eyes as well. It's the kind of realization. I mean, we had somebody, what was his name? Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake had in some sense kind of developed this concept of morphic fields, and as if it's like the human civilizations or memories of this kind of planetary field of intelligence or whatever. Regardless of how the person is reintroduced to the nature of their world. As much as there are unknown individual actions and known individual actions, there are also unknown collective actions and known collective actions. Our civilization has not attempted too many known collective actions. Maybe like registering on Facebook is one of those collective actions. But one where the person feels drawn towards that system of existence. So, anyways, guys, I hope this was helpful. Idris, your last comment got my attention. I'm gonna just respond to it. If God is word, word has meaning and can be known, else it won't be a word, but some scramble. To be honest, God is not a word. I don't believe. I'm saying even you're not a word. We use words, right? And there is this thing that Rumi says: silence is the language of God, and all else is poor translation. It's literally like how much rice are we holding in our hand in relation to all the rice that's in the bowl. It's kind of like the same sensitivity we have needed as a creature on this planet to be aware and attentive to what's happening externally. Imagine crossing the street. So Just like you need to be aware of external movements, now Mr. Within is suggesting you need to be aware of internal movements and how internal movements lead to the kind of personalization of behavior and how the moment is being personified into meaning every moment. So we have to become serious and more real with what our attention really means to us. And you are driven into two paths. You are either those who live for themselves. You are choosing to be the creator of meaning, and those who live for others are choosing to, in some sense, uh, one is inspired through a known universe. The other is inspired from an unknown universe. That means helping is an action that is emotionally justified at times. It's not a rational thing, even though if somebody rationally helps, it feels off. It's something where it's as if once you see through the eyes of the person, you can relate. You know, it's the multidimensional renaissance is how many inner dimensions of man are marching out. I feel art is not dead. It's just it's being reborn. The phoenix is rising from the ashes. You know, in for example, the Medici family, where when they had power in Italy, they had this kind of vision of making society beautiful. You know, so what does that mean? That means they thought, all right, these tourists, again, as I was saying earlier, these tourists in traveling in space and time, it's as if the more beautiful the streets of the city is, the more beauty the person is feeling. When you walk in the streets, it's so dull. It's literally like we painted gray and made everything into boxes. It's like the geometrical value of our streets is so little. Do you know? There needs to be a totally geometrical transformation. Imagine the streets of every nation were clean. Do you know? Were in a way where it was as if the species was not worried about who to help. It had already helped. Now it was waiting for what it could build. Kind of the redemption of the human mind from a collective consideration. So, anyways, guys, I hope this talk was helpful. I feel every person needs to study language and their relationship with it, and eventually they'll kind of notice how life is being life for them. And don't forget about the unknown. You know, the known is something that is always changing. The unknown appears more changeless, it appears as an observer. That means the only reason we have the word mind because this consciousness can observe the body. This consciousness is aware there's a body here. If there was not that awareness, then there would be no mind. And the definition of a creature without a mind is one that is not aware it has a mind. It's like sometimes animals you can totally see the efforts of their minds. Do you know? And the human advantage is that it's not only linear. We have access. Our creativity is always nonlinear. That's how we know it's new. Trust the moment where your sight is happening. Suffering is the content in the moment changing. The moment cannot suffer. The moment doesn't have a personality. It's just pure being. Remember your true presence, for you have one lifetime to do so. at least in this form. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Much blessings and namaste.